Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to talk today about another hand I played this summer at the World Series of Poker. This came from a relatively deep run in the 1500 Dealer's Choice event. If you were watching my video most recently, I talked about a big PLO hand that I played early on in the Dealer's Choice that gave me a really big stack early on in day one. Fast forwarding to late in day two, I believe, we're now way inside the money and kind of getting down to the final few tables. So definitely some ICM considerations going on, but this hand I think for me was maybe sort of unavoidable, not really one that I'm really worried about strategically, but I thought it gives us an opportunity to go over a couple concepts. So the way the hand played out was someone I was not very familiar with, but an experienced mixed game player that plays a lot of the World Series tournaments, limped under the gun in the Big O round, pot limit Big O. And I had a much covering stack in late position, in fact on the button, and I decided to open raise pot with ace deuce, 6, 7, 10, double suited with the ace high diamonds and 10 high clubs. And the blinds folded, and the villain that had limped now limp-re-raised. And this is not great news for me. He very clearly has a strong hand that was trapping pre, but equities run close pre in Big O, and I don't really think there's much of an argument for folding my hand facing the limp-re-raise. It is unfortunate that I'm probably somewhat dominated here. His hand most likely is aces with something else. But I decided to call. There was not too much left behind. The flop came King Jack 6 with 2 clubs and a spade. I had 10 high clubs and no spades in my hand. And he went all in, which I expected him to do with basically his entire range. And once we counted down his stack, he had just about exactly half pot in his stack. So I don't remember exactly what the pot size was. I didn't write that down, but I know that the SPR, what we call the stack to pot ratio, that's a good way to think about these sort of situations in big bet poker, was 0.5. That's what I wrote down. So if the pot had already had 100 chips in it, I guess in this case, let's say 100,000, then he bet all in for 50,000. So we'll do two things on the channel today. We're going to look at my equity against various hands that he can have. I called relatively quickly and bricked out and doubled him up. I believe he had aces with clubs, and I was in pretty bad shape. We're going to look at how I was doing against his hand, how I was doing against various hands that he could have, and also how you can do this pot odds calculation to make sure you're getting the right price, even if you know what your equity is in a tool like ProPokerTools Odds Oracle. So you can see here I have the board in Odds Oracle already put in for 5-card Omaha high-low. I've got my hand, and we're going to tinker around with his hand a little bit and look at what our equity will be against various hands. So the most likely hand that I thought that he held was just any sort of flavor of aces. So if we just look at all aces, that's a good starting place. We can find that that I'm a small favorite on the flop. So that immediately makes me feel better about putting the money in here. I mean, I think it was a no-brainer in the moment, given the price that I was getting, but yeah, this is a nice sanity check that this is actually quite a good flop for me against all aces. Now, you could argue that he's probably only going to have pretty strong aces in this situation, so we can give him something like all aces that are in the top 5% of dealt hands in Big O, and we can see here, if we rerun that, how am I doing? We drop slightly, but we're basically 50-50 against that, so that's, again, a very good sign. You could also start picking specific hand combos if you want to, really worry about it. Like let's just say that he only can have ace, ace, deuce, and then whatever side cards. I mean, that would be worse for me still, but maybe, actually not even worse for me, because now he doesn't dominate the high cards as much. So now I'm up to 52%. So it's really just looking like not a big deal whatsoever. And then obviously we could also pick, like, specifically giving him ace of clubs with another club, or we could even say aces with the ace of clubs and 2 clubs, and top 5%. This is about the worst case scenario I can imagine here, where he has a very, very strong hand. He definitely has aces, and he definitely has nut clubs. And in this scenario, we drop to 33%. So if I am up against aces with the flush draw, it's definitely the worst case scenario. That makes sense. But even with 33% equity here, it's a no-brainer to get it in here. And I will quickly take you guys through the pot odds exercise if you don't know how to do that. Because I think it's something that all poker players should know how to do. You probably do, but maybe you forgot from Theory of Poker from way back in the day when you first learned calculating pot odds. Whatever the pot is, let's use round numbers here. Let's say the pot is 100 in this situation. If the SPR was 0.5, then that means that he's betting all in for 50. So in this situation, I have to call 50 to win the 100 in the middle plus the 50 in my opponent's stack. So I have to call 50 to win 150. And that gives us pot odds of 150, 250, which I can't really type here, but we'd often type it as 150 colon 50, which is 50 out of 200. So you can calculate, my money goes into the pot as well. So the final pot size is the pot of 100 plus his 50 plus my 50 is a total pot size of 200. And I'm risking 50 to win 200. And hopefully you guys can figure out the math there. I need 25% equity to break even. And these are sort of like really common things that pot limit players know by heart, of course. But when your opponent bets all in and there's no more money behind, you can quickly do these sort of calculations to figure out whether you're getting the right price or not based on the equity that you're estimating that you have against his range. So if we imagine for a moment that instead of having only 50 left in his stack, that he had 100 left in his stack and he is betting exactly pot for all in, then I hope you guys can do that exercise after my example, but let's go ahead and do it together. Now, instead of the 50 to win 150, I have to call 100 plus to win his bet plus the middle, which is 200. So now I'm getting 200 to 100 for pot odds of 1 out of 300. 100 out of 300 is, if I could type, 100 out of 300 is 33%. So in the absolute worst case scenario where I'm up against aces with the nut flush draw and he was deeper and betting exactly pot, I would still be getting right around the price to call with my hand, and it would be a break-even or zero EV proposition. Now, there is a little bit of a complication because of the stage of the tournament that we're in. If it was a close one, I would want to lean towards folding probably, because obviously preserving my chips is very valuable. And if it's a zero EV call, then I would rather avoid the variance and just fold. A principle of tournament poker that's very important is that the chips that you can win are not as impactful as the chips remaining in your stack. So having one chip left in your stack is infinitely better than zero, and as a result, saving chips can be more important than gaining chips. However, in this situation, it was not really close whatsoever. Not only was I getting an incredibly good price because of him only being able to bet half pot all in, but also, you know, this is the worst case scenario where I'm up against aces with a nut flush draw. And we already saw there's plenty of hands that he would have to go with here, including his other aces combos, where I'm flipping or even a small favorite. So this one didn't work out for me. It didn't end my tournament. I did have some chips left over and did play some more memorable hands that I'm probably going to get to on this channel. At least one more interesting Raz hand came up before the end of my tournament in this 1500 Dealer's Choice, as I made a bit of a deep run. So we will get to that in a future video. But I hope that this helps you guys to refresh your memory about pot odds calculations, looking over some equities in Big O. And one thing that always surprises me when I look up 5-card Omaha hands, especially Big O, but also 5-card Omaha High, is a lot of times hands have more equity than you think. It is actually pretty hard to be in really, really bad shape. And in this scenario, with even just a 10 high flush draw against a single opponent, we could see that it really wasn't very close. So I wish I would have won this hand, but I'm happy to see that my decision to put it in was really no big deal. Let me know what questions this brings up for you. If this didn't make sense, please let me know. I'll spend more time on it in future videos. If this seems really simple to you, great. You know, you understand basic pot odds and you understand basic equity calculations. Always a good trait for playing shallow stacked PLO games. Yeah, let me know what you think. I'll see you guys on the comments. Talk to you soon.